Hello, thank you very much. I'm Aaron Kent, and I'm going to read a series of very strangely composed poems. So, a kind of short backstory. To get right into it, a year ago, I was teaching a lesson when I had a stroke. I just felt very ill, and I was rushed to the staff room where an air ambulance touched down, and I was taken to the ICU. I spent 2 weeks in the ICU, mostly unconscious. My amazing wife was at the back dealing with our 2 children who were 0 and 3 at the time, all entirely by herself with her mums. She's got 2 mums and we live very close by. And then I got moved out of the ICU after 2 weeks into a normal ward, and then I moved to a neuro rehab hospital for 2 weeks. And luckily, as you can see, I've made a relatively good recovery. At first it wasn't certain whether I'd walk again. At first my wife was told I wouldn't make it through the night. But I've got a scar on my right temporal lobe, so I'm partially blind now, and I have chronic insomnia that won't go away. I have had insomnia my whole life, but a month before the brain hemorrhage I solved it, and then I had the hemorrhage and it brought it back. So I wonder if sleep caused the brain hemorrhage, is my suspicion. So I'm on some hardcore sleeping tablets, and when the sleeping tablets kick in, I start to write poetry. So when I'm half asleep, drowsing to get my 3 hours a night, I start to write my poetry. And I wake up in the morning, it's just weird spelling mistakes, strange typos, a bunch of symbols and letters, and some really odd subconscious thoughts. So it's like a Breton's surrealist automatic writing is what I'm attempting to achieve, but by trying to remove the conscious from it entirely in the first stage. Then I consciously edit that into a poem the next day, and then work through it and edit it, etc., etc. So I'm about 60 poems into the manuscript. It's called Circadian Rhythm Fashion Week. Thank you. And my agent is sending it to a few places at the moment, so I'm going to read a few poems from it for you. The first one is called Hovercraft as a Verb, and I wrote it for my nearest neighbour, who is a relatively unknown poet called Gillian Clark. She was only the national poet of Wales, and she happens to live right by us. Why not a little nature poetry? I could name breeze blocks along the A30. I usually just imagine wavelets breaking over the border of Cornwall and Devon. The TV is going to bear children and burden them with souls. Eddie died too young. My head is hurting again. I am 2 migraines away from appreciating sirens. So the one that stood out to me there was I did write I could name breeze blocks along the A30, which I don't think I could do, but what seemed like the right thing to put into the poem. The next one's called Candy Pop with an exclamation mark, so it's more like candy pop. And this is the one that seemed to have got the most love whenever I've read it. There's also another one that I'm not going to read tonight, which happened to be about Craig David, and I don't know why. I, like the rest of you, until tonight, I haven't thought about him since the mid-noughties. But it mentioned him and a birthday cake, so that's what that poem became. Because that's kind of the idea and structure of this process, is to let the subconscious guide the core of the poem, and then it's the conscious editing the subconscious. So this one's called Candy Pop. I am writing to you in the hopes you may consider stabbing me. Somewhere easy enough to penetrate, but I don't want to bleed. I don't like blood. At the very least, you could remove the letters from my phone. Sometimes the vowels affect me. They keep me up at the wrong times. I have yet to be bitten by a dog, but that can change with enough kibble and some gusto. But isn't kibble an American term? Don't we just call them dog biscuits over here? Our cat has stopped believing in miracles. I worry it will be doing her more harm than good. What's life without the magic of feline recidivism? The clenched mouth seizing between the teeth, a stray gallbladder left behind. I am writing this from the centre of a lollipop. I am supposed to be bubblegum, but I think this will be slightly more rewarding. I am not sure where any of that came from when I wrote it, and that's kind of the joy of doing this, is that you look back the next day and you think, sometimes you can make connections. And other times I just have no idea where any of it came from. And it taps into a sort of a vein of writing that I wouldn't do consciously. Because consciously, I don't know about other writers here, but I'm always aware of what I'm writing as I'm writing it, and I'm always trying to guide it, etc. As this is completely driven by different outside influences. So this one was obviously written when I was feeling a bit down on myself, because it's called I'm Sorry for All These Poems. When I wrote it after my agent sent it off, and I kind of felt like whoever was reading them should have a small apology. And then I subtitled it, I apologise for these poems, just in case I wasn't clear with my apology to start off with. So yeah, this is the final one. I find that with some of these, so it was October the 7th that I had the brain hemorrhage. So just over a year ago, not just over 2 weeks ago. I wouldn't be here. And the school that I was working at the time, I don't work there anymore. Now I just run my publishing press, Broken Sleep Books, full time. So I've published Stephen and Richard, who's in the audience, and I just run that full time now. But I went back to the school I was teaching at to do a National Poetry Day workshop for them, because they wanted to maintain some sort of connection, which I really liked. However, National Poetry Day fell on the 7th of October this year. And I said I can't go back to the place it happened on the day it happened. And it's tempting fate, so I went the day before. But as it was leading up to that time, clearly, whether it was consciously spoken about or otherwise, clearly I was thinking about the hemorrhage a lot. Because every time I get a headache now, I think it's happening again. Even though I've been completely cleared, I had a letter about a month ago saying there's no fragility, there's a scar on the lobe, but there's no fragility, there's no weakness, there's no problem. That medical anxiety never goes away, and it's the same for my wife. She's always fearing for me as well. But this was written in the run-up, maybe the month up to that date, so it was obviously on my mind a lot. So I'm sorry for all these poems. I apologise for these poems. I haven't got the hang of killing myself yet, though. Lord, I've been trying for the better part of a decade, but I'm okay now. Better than I've ever been, and all it took was a little brain bleed. Aaron can have a little hemorrhage as a treat. While I lay counting prayers on my fingers in the side alley of an ICU, I pictured the world as pottery on a wheel, spun each morning, the sun pulling into focus, the sky stretching itself across a smorgasbord of nature, a footnote pressed against the window looking in. It's only a footnote if I held you with me across the border, as memory carries each deity into permanence. The annex has been lived in. It has housed more metaphors than I have to spare, so we have to make do with bland adjectives. The drugs don't work, but they no longer make it worse. Every song is a lie wrapped up as a valuable investment. So on that one, I spelled drugs D-R-U-Q-K-S, because I was editing an anthology via Aphex Twin poetry at the time. And that's the title of an Aphex Twin song, which is Drugs in Cornish. So yes, that's me. Thank you very much.